controlling their own lives, less being determined by folks in Washington, what do? And so much of our politics is that wedge. You know, do you like Trump or not like Trump? Do you hate Hillary more than you hate Trump? And all these issues that are going to be decided somehow by the U.S. Congress, which frankly hasn't made any decent decision on any issue in as long as I can recall. And it just dawned on me that the agenda that we need in our country right now can be driven by us at the grassroots level. I think there are three areas where we have a lot of problems. One is that government is completely unaccountable. We have our last president promised us we could keep our doctors and our health plans. It was just a flat out lie. I'm sure that no matter what happens with Mr. Trump, the best case scenario, there's a lot of things that aren't going to happen that people thought would happen. And so we get to this point, and it seems to me that we have to first hold government accountable. I think that means things like term limits. The only thing on the federal level that I'm excited about is the fact that I think there's a very good chance we'll get a vote on term limits on a constitutional amendment in both the House and the Senate. And I don't have any illusions that we'll get 2/3 of the votes of the critters who are in our Congress today. But I do think that puts them on record. My common sense today is entitled Trump's Trump. And I suggest that he could put the bully in bully pulpit by using a vote on term limits against anyone who claims that they're for reform in Washington. Well, they better vote for term limits then. And this may be the first time we've had a clean vote in Congress, because in the past, in '94, when we got a vote after so many initiatives, 23 states had passed term limits for their own delegation, a lot of momentum. They voted on 4 separate proposals and allowed 355 of the 435 members of Congress to vote yes for term limits, and yet no measure got 290 votes in order to pass. So if there's one vote, one measure, I think that can be a very helpful thing. I don't think it means we get term limits, but I think it means we take a very big step toward that. And of course, we have groups like U.S. Term Limits. I serve on their board, worked for the organization for many years that's pushing for term limits. We need that sort of thing to hold government accountable. We need to reduce pay and perks and pensions and all the things that allow legislators to cash in for themselves instead of represent us. Study I think we talked about last time I was on, Joe, that showed that the more you pay legislators, the less they pay attention to what you want. We can do the arithmetic on that one all day and realize we need to cut back on all the perks and bennies we're giving legislators. The other areas are fighting crony capitalism. I think that there's a consensus among people that free markets are good. The problem is that the free markets get co-opted by powerful politicians and their crony friends. And so the key thing, I think, in getting people on the same page from the right to the left is fighting crony capitalism and these insider deals between government and powerful industries, and stop those. And we can do that at the local level. It'll take a while, I think, to get any type of control on that at the federal level, but we can do it in our cities and towns. We can do it statewide by cutting down on licensing laws and stopping some of these subsidies that are happening for millionaire, billionaire sports owners, and you name it. And then the last area that I think we've got to focus on, and I think Trump is on the wrong side of this, although maybe he'll see the light, is in protecting our liberties and getting a handle on criminal justice. We've got way too many people in jail. We're allowing police forces at the federal, state, and local level to take people's property without any charge or conviction of a crime. That's completely un-American. It's called civil asset forfeiture. Polls show Americans 75–80% opposed to it, and yet we're not getting enough action on it to stop it cold right now. And as we've discussed previously too, this year we get our vote in Ferguson, Missouri on requiring them not only to wear police cameras, but to have the right rules and regulations so that they can't just turn off their camera whenever they feel like it, and so that there's privacy protection. So I think that the agenda, we ought to stop looking for Washington to tell us what the agenda is. We ought to stop watching TV to find out what the agenda is, and we need to start telling people, here's our agenda, and put it on the ballot, make it real, change the law, and that's hold government accountable, fight crony capitalism, and protect our liberties.
Yeah. You know, where I see Trump taking the wrong road is, instead of him saying, listen, this is a country run by the people serving in office are servants of the people, we're going to return the power of the country back to the people. I am not going to tell you what's going to be done. You are going to decide that for yourself. So all this legislation and all of these departments have been set up, and all of these secretaries of you name it that have been in office that are going to dictate how things are going to work. In other words, us telling you what to do, we're going to dissolve that. We're going to dismember all of this and return the power of running this country back to the people. That I never heard. What I did hear is what he is going to do to make America great again. Well, he can't do a thing about making America great, but he sure can give me the latitude and the freedom to make my world better. And by me making my world better, I make everyone around me and associated with me better off. And the same with everyone else. It seems like he is talking a good game, but he's coming from the wrong angle. He wants the power to make things better, when he should be saying, I want to give all of my power back to the people to make America great again. That's where I think he missed the boat right up front. Do you agree with me, or do you disagree?
110% agree with you that the key is him understanding that it's empowering the average person and the average business owner, small and large, to do what they want to do in the economy. That's what makes the economy grow. That's what creates jobs. You know, there's been so much emphasis, I think, on Trump as the guy who can cut deals. But if you look back at American history, did America become a rich and powerful country because our presidents were such great deal cutters? No. We became a rich and powerful country because we had a basic level of economic freedom that allowed not one great man, but millions of hardworking, everyday, common, decent human beings, men and women, to run their businesses, to make a buck, to provide a greater service, to find a way to do it better, and to keep doing it better, and keep making money, and keep building. That's what built America. It wasn't that, James K. Polk was the greatest, deal maker of his generation, or that Ulysses Grant, the great general, was such a smart businessman. We can't create jobs by cutting these deals that, like with Carrier or threatening GM. We've got to create a business environment that makes people want to do business here. It's as simple as that. And I do think that Trump is on the right course when he talks about getting rid of all the regulations that most people don't see because they don't run a business, and that's just completely making our economy stagnant. And then the other thing is to cut corporate income taxes. We've got all these trillions of dollars overseas that they don't want to bring back because we have a very high corporate income tax. Now, some experts will tell you, well, it is high and it isn't high, and it depends. And what they're really saying is, well, it's complicated enough that if you know the right people in Congress to write the right little code in the tax code, I think it was GE, which is a pretty darn big corporation that paid zero in corporate income taxes. So what we have is a system that allows some people who are multi-billionaire, and not just people, but corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, to not pay taxes, while the smaller corporation is paying one of the heaviest corporate income taxes in the world. If Trump will move on those things, and like you say, if he'll get it that it's not about him being superhuman or anyone being superhuman, It's about unleashing the brilliance of people all over this country and letting them do their businesses and live their lives.
Yeah. You know, I read an article just 2 days ago, and it may have been you. It may have been on Common Sense, where at one time when a mining community, for example, was in it closed the mines. You know, the mining was passé, and people would when people would move from that community and move to a community that was more productive, and
Right.
But today, if there's a mining community and the mines close down because of exhaustion, regulation, or whatever the case may be, people stay there because they get all sorts of government subsidies because the government participated in closing that mine usually. And so to appease the people, they put them on all sorts of government welfare programs and assistance programs and food programs and you name it, you know. And so the people stay there. They stay poor. They don't go anywhere. They don't look for opportunity. So the government always seems to be at fault when anything deteriorates. Look at the government and look at the policies of government, and you'll find that the policy of government put a damper on everyone's natural instinct to move on and get better, to improve their lot in life. It's the old case. The worst sin in the world is enabling other people. Any person who has enabled their children, find out, I don't care what's their status in life. They can be multimillionaires, they can be poor. If you enable children, they become worthless. They become the drug addicts. They don't work. They rely on you. They always come back. They always have an excuse. And I have dozens of personal examples of people, friends of ours, that really great people, but they always give to their children, never make them go out on their own and say, now it's your turn to find your way in life. And it's the same with the government. The government is the biggest enabler in the world, and it's destroying this nation. And Trump is not doing anything to reverse that.
Well, and hasn't really even identified that as a problem. And it is a huge problem area. It's, you know, I think most people they're reluctant. We want there to be a safety net. We don't want anyone to starve on the street. And of course, I think if you look back through history, you'll realize there wasn't a lot of starving on the streets, not in the last 100, 200 years, and that people will do what they have to do. I remember after the welfare reform of the 1990s, which was supposed to be so draconian and terrible, and the Washington Post ran a multi-part series, and it would go through someone who was on assistance and what their life was like and the difficulties. And then at the end of the article or toward the end, they would say, well, what are you going to do when it runs out? And they would invariably say, I guess I'm going to have to get a job. Well, you know, I was about 18 years old when it dawned on me that my parents had supplied all these needs from, you know, cereal in the cupboard and milk in the fridge to, you know, toilet paper in the bathroom, and that now there was nobody supplying that for me. And by golly, I had to actually go out and get a job. And believe it or not, the first job I came to was not CEO of a major corporation, but working at Taco Bell. And you know, one of the good things about the job is that I got to eat there.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I didn't have money. I had some nice, you know, girlfriends and other friends that would feed me from time to time. And if I went to my parents, you know, they usually would let me sneak something out of the refrigerator. That is the reality of life, and we're not going to get away from that. And so, you know, it was earlier this week that I did a piece off of a piece that Ronald Bailey did for Reason about West Virginia and the town that he grew up in, and the fact that almost everybody in that town now is on disability or some sort of assistance from the government, and that nothing's happening. And years ago, you would have seen people leave certain parts of the country where work ran out and move to another part. And the truth is, change is coming faster, not slower. And studies have been done for years that have found where a big plant that really sustains a town closes, if they say, geez, this is terrible, what are we going to do tomorrow, and start taking steps, they recover very quickly.
Right.
If they say, this can't happen to us, this is somehow morally wrong that our company isn't going to keep giving us jobs day after, year after year, and fight it and challenge it in court and look for government to do something, 10 years, 20 years later, they're still struggling. And so it's not about being cruel. It's not about, just suffer if life doesn't go your way. We all know there's a lot of twists and turns. We've all been lucky. I like to say that thank goodness we don't get what we deserve, or almost all of us would get a lot less. But we do have to have some sort of accountability, and these sorts of programs, I mean, the welfare system has locked people in, and it hasn't locked them with a key. They can leave anytime, but they are encouraged not to go get a job. I talked last year, did several commentaries about a guaranteed basic income. And in the end, this is where the government would give everybody a certain amount of money. In the end, I didn't like it because it feeds into that whole I'm owed something by government, which, government doesn't have anything except taking away from you and me and your listeners.
Right.
So that's not the right way to go. But what was attractive about it is that in today's world, if you are on assistance and you are trying to better your lot by going out and getting a job and earning some extra money, you have to constantly be wary that I'm going to lose something by being more productive.
Right.
Whereas under a system in which everybody's given a set welfare payment, you could go out and work all the time. We have to create a world with the right incentives.
Right.
And it goes to everything. There's a big series going on right now in the Washington Post about the criminal justice, and I think we have a lot of people in jail who really don't belong in jail. And there's other ways that even if they did commit a crime, it wasn't the sort of violent crime that
Right.
you need to lock somebody away for. But at the same time, we don't want to just say, oh, we got too many people in jail, nobody has to go to jail anymore. And what they found is that violent offenders and people who were not committing victimless crimes, but who were breaking into people's homes, were given extra breaks, let out early, not put in jail. And then, lo and behold, they commit a violent act or a rape or beat somebody up and hijack their car. And in almost every case, as you read these articles, the criminal is saying, I was basically sent signals that I could do anything I damn well pleased, that there's not going to be any punishment. That is not a good thing. And we see it, as you pointed out earlier, with our kids. We're always wanting, you don't love anybody more than you love your kids, and you always want them to have the best of everything, and you'd love to do it for them, except you know that if you do that, you ruin them.
Right.
You spoil them.
Right.
And we kid about that sometimes. And I'm a grandparent now. I'm allowed to spoil them. It's somebody else's problem.
That's right.
But my goodness, you don't want to do that with your kids. And you see it every time. And you see it in yourself. I'm one of these people that if you protect me from running into that brick wall, you're going to have to stand there day after day after day protecting me from that brick wall.
Right.
But if you get out of the way, the first time I hit that brick wall, I'm going to say, ow, that hurt. And I'm smart enough not to run into that brick wall again.
Yeah.
So that's what we have as a society, and it permeates every aspect from education to transportation. We had a wonderful subway system in the Washington, D.C. metro area for a long time, paid for by all of you folks in Oklahoma and around the country, and we were much appreciative of it. But there was no incentive to do what a private business would have done, which would have been to say, hey, we've got a good thing going here. Let's make sure we do the proper maintenance and the other things to protect our investment. Right. Because nobody makes any money, because it's a money loser. Everybody wants to ride it because it's subsidized, and no one wants to fix it or keep it up because there's no money in it.
Right.
And we complain about profit, but years ago, it must have been 10 or more years ago, I remember seeing on the front page of the paper an article that said the metro system had a huge problem, too many riders. and it just hit me like a ton of bricks.
Too many
Goodness,
riders.
what business would say we have a huge problem, too many customers? Well, I'll tell you what business. A business that loses money on every customer
Right.
doesn't want too many customers.
Right.
And why can't we have a system in which, and privatize it, but even if you didn't go all the way to privatizing it, that charges a rate at which they think they might actually be able to break even or make a profit, and charges people the actual cost of going from point A to point B. Would no one be able to afford that cost? I don't think that's accurate. I think if we have a free market, people are going to say, well, I want people coming to work today, and if I have to subsidize them, I will. But that's a free voluntary action. It's not all put on the backs of taxpayers. I had a discussion yesterday about, because I did a commentary saying that parents ought to have more controls in the schools, and there was a discussion about who really are the customers for public education. And one person argued, in reality, it's the taxpayers, because they're paying the bills.
That's right.
But of course, the taxpayers, more than half of the taxpayers don't have any kids in the school.
Right.
And so again, if we have a society, no matter how rich and brilliant and well-educated and wonderful and nice we are, in which we have customers and providers separated by government regulation, or we have people paying for a service, but totally different people using that service, if the customer and the provider are not connected, we're going to have a very screwed up system. And frankly, that's exactly what we've got.
Well, that's what bothers me, is that Trump, being a businessman, doesn't see this clearly. For example, when people ask me, what do I attribute, what actions did I take that made me as successful as I have been, other than working day and night, almost to death. And I said, the one thing that stands out is that when I worked for this large company, and I was the facilities manager for this company, and they closed the place down, and of course everyone had to leave.
Right.
I passed by the unemployment office, and I was going to be eligible, and I don't recall how long, a year or 2 years of unemployment, and it would have been a nice sum of money for me. And I passed by the unemployment office, and I said to myself, I can't do that. That will ruin me. And I went to my wife's audiology practice, sat down, got a corner of a room, of a spare room, made a desk out of the top of the radiator. It's an older building, beautiful building, but an older building. That was my office, the top of a radiator, and I started my own business. And that's what I attribute my success to, is the fact that I did not stop and collect my unemployment that I had paid into that was due me. But Trump should be talking that. He should be saying things like that. Not that, don't you do anything, I'll take care of it. I'm going to negotiate this deal, and I'm going to make sure that this company stays here or that company moves there. And if they don't, then I'm going to make them suffer for it. That's sending out all the wrong signals. And I can't tell you, there's very few people who would agree with me on that.
Well, I think because they see the headlines that jobs saved, oh, he's doing a wonderful thing. And I think people have gotten to the point where, well, everybody does it. Every community is basically making their given employers pay heavier taxes so they can offer some huge subsidy to some huge corporation to come into town that doesn't have to pay the same property taxes that everybody else pays, which to me should be 110% illegal under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. If you're charging property taxes to everyone, you can't make an exception and say, but this big corporation that we want to come to our town doesn't have to pay those taxes. Unfortunately, that's not how the courts have seen it. That isn't how it's worked out. But I think people have become numb to just how sickening these crony deals are. And frankly, any small business in America understands exactly what you're talking about. And I don't want to take anything away from Trump. They make a big deal that his dad loaned him a bunch of money, millions of dollars, and he disputes. He says it was $1 million. They say it was tens of millions. Whatever it was, he's had some success. He's no dummy. He didn't take that. A lot of people, their pop could give them $1 million and it'd be gone in about 2 weeks.
Right.
So I'm not taking anything away from him. But the reality is, his experience in business is at a level in which you're doing deals with politicians. You're using eminent domain to push people out so that you can build something. You're getting tax abatements. You're getting subsidies. We need to get rid of all of that at all levels. And look, any businessman who makes a ton of money, I salute him.
Right.
But make it on your own, and you don't get any extra benefits. You get rich. That's what happens in America. You do good work, you get rich, but you don't get any special tax abatements. You don't get subsidies. These sports teams that run around and are being subsidized by politicians, forcing the taxpayers along, and then it turns out that those same politicians have, these beautiful sky boxes at the stadium. I mean, this is just corruption right in front of our face, and it's become normal. And Trump is in that part of the business world, not in the same part that the guy who owns the gas station, the guy who owns the repair business, the plumber, the folks who are starting an internet company from scratch in their garage. Those people understand how much work it takes and how you have to do it on your own smarts and hard work. And that's a beautiful system. A system where you do it because you know somebody who happens to be a powerful politician. That's not how we got rich as a country.
Yeah.
And I think we have to continually look at that. And I think it's so clear with Donald Trump. So many people, we need him because he's going to make us rich again. But our presidents don't make us rich. They sometimes make us poor, but they don't make us rich. They never have, and I submit they never will.
Yeah. Well, what really bothers me about Trump is that he does not look at the root cause of the problem. The situation with the manufacturing cars in Mexico, for example. We have a free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. Free trade. That's what we should be talking about, is free trade. I applaud free trade. But he's saying to Ford Motor Company and to others that if you manufacture in Mexico and bring it in here, I'm going to impose a 35% tax on it. Now, embargo. Well, wait a minute. That's going in the wrong direction. The problem is not that in Mexico the cars are being built less expensively. It's because of all of the restrictions and laws and labor laws and subsidies here in the United States make it so incredibly expensive to do business. He should say, let's get rid of all of these restrictions to pure capitalism and free enterprise, and then we can be more competitive with Mexico. But if Mexico can still make it less expensively, and we're in a free trade agreement, and we shouldn't even need a free trade agreement. It should be free trade, period. Let them bring them in here, and then that'll force the companies here to become more productive without government intrusion, without government subsidy, become more productive, and when they become more productive, then we can sell the cars, employ people here, sell the cars here for the same price. He's got it all bass-ackwards. Everything is bass-ackwards with this guy. Everything.
And do we have these businesses here today because they somehow can't figure out how to leave? I mean, labor is cheaper almost anywhere else in the world. Anywhere in South America or Africa or Asia, you're going to be able to get labor cheaper than you can in the United States. So why hasn't everybody left? Because the only input in the price of a good and in your profit is not labor costs. The truth is, if we can be 10 times as productive in the United States of America and we're being paid 9 times as much, businesses are going to flock here because they'll make more money. You can fight the incentives. You can say, stay here and lose money for the good of the country. But the bottom line is people have to make a profit as individual employees. They have to produce a profit for their company. As businesses, they have to produce a profit. Otherwise, people come and take your stuff away because you can't pay your bills. It's not that mean capitalists somewhere want the world to be this way. If we don't produce enough to sustain ourselves, we don't get sustained.
Right.
And government doesn't have a magic wand to do it for us. The other thing that kills me about Trump is this idea that he's going to impose 35% tariffs, because that, if you've been through third grade civics, is not how the country works. He could go to the Congress and he could say, we need to have a new law, and maybe the Congress would do that. But we have to not buy in to this insanity that one guy is so smart or such a great deal cutter that we need to give him carte blanche total power to run a multi-trillion-dollar economy. It's not smart. It's not how we got to where we are economically. And when you think about it in political terms, it's why a lot of people are scared of Donald Trump. And I look, when people, in fact, I have a young daughter who wasn't a big fan of Donald Trump, as I haven't been. I'm not a big fan of Hillary Clinton either, of course, but she and several other young folks who are going to the community college by us were very afraid after the election of what Donald Trump could do. And I said, welcome to my world. The difference is you think Donald Trump, because you don't like, this and that and something else, is going to do terrible things and we need to be afraid. Well, I agree. But so could the last president and the president before that. And the solution is not to always vote for the perfect candidate, because as you and I know, the perfect candidate is almost never on the ballot as a choice. In fact, never, not almost never, never.
That's right.
And so we have to put limits on government so they can't do things to make us afraid. We ought to have elections that we hope the right guy wins, but it doesn't matter that much, because we have constitutional protections that mean you can't ruin our business. You can't come and take my stuff without charging me with a crime. You can't control what I do in my bedroom. You can't dictate who I love. These things, we don't want that to be decided each election. That should be decided and has been, and that's why we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. So that's, Donald Trump has not been good about explaining the relationship between government and individual citizens. And that's, I think, a very valid point that you make, and something that we've got to remind people constantly. Look, we aren't asking as citizens for saviors who will come in and do miracles. That's not going to happen. We're just asking for people not to get in our way. We've got tons of brilliant people in this country. We know how to do stuff. Let the brilliance and the decency of the American people go to work, and we'll solve our problems. Get the heck out of the way. But the way to ruin all of that is to say, no, we're going to put all the beans in we're going to put everything into this basket with one guy who somehow is so brilliant he's going to make all the right trade deals.
Yeah. Well, people say that he's going to run the country like he runs a business. Well, you can't run a country like you run a business on many levels. But more importantly, when I heard that, it reminded me of when BMW went broke actually twice back in the 70s and 80s. And then in the 1990s, they woke up and they said, we've been a very top-down organization. We told everyone what to do when they go to the restroom, when they come in, when they have lunch, how many times they turn the bolt on the. We told them everything. They weren't making it. They were going to go belly up totally the last time around, and they decided to turn the company over to the employees. Well, there was a turnaround that was instantaneous. In fact, there was thousands of people applying for a job at the BMW plant in Germany, and you know who hires the employees? the employees in hiring employees. And they said that there's a group of, I think, 14, and excuse me if my numbers are wrong, and they interview this person, and this person is under the hot seat. And when they come in, they are so protective of their job. They want to make sure their job is so perfect that they maintain that status within that group. And it's transformed the company from top down to bottom up. Now obviously these people don't know about the strategy of the automotive industry worldwide and whether or not what kind of cars. But when it comes to making the cars, they leave that to the employees. Trump did not take any lessons from any of these companies. He is running the company like he runs Trump Towers, and you can't do that. And I would love to have had him say, Department of Agriculture. Quite frankly, I don't understand why we need a Department of Agriculture. We have people, we have farmers whose families have been in agriculture for 200 years. You mean they don't know how to grow crops? What do we need this clown here for, who's never planted a poppy seed in his life? Why do I have him here telling farmers what to do? Get rid of that whole damn department. And he could have done that to every single cabinet post, every single one of them, and been a hero. Saved tens of billions of dollars, and at the same time did that to the military.
Yes, no, without question, there is so much. Just we have agencies that not only don't provide anything good, they basically provide all kinds of mandates and controls that stop local people in your town or your state from being able to do the right thing. And I look at education. I had a commentary about some rules in Virginia about having to tell parents when kids are going to be reading books that might have some very adult themes and so on. And there was a debate, and my niece, who is much more on the left than I am, especially economically, but a very bright person and a very caring teacher and a young teacher. And in debating back and forth, I realized, so much of what needs to happen, we're talking about a Band-Aid to somehow say to teachers, you have to inform parents, but it's this huge bureaucracy. And I realized teachers have a zillion other burdens on them. The truth is, if somehow we could tell every school in America, you're going to keep getting the money you're getting, but you now are independent. You're your own school. You do it the way you want to do it, whether you want to have the teachers all elect a principal to run it or the teachers do it as a collective, however you want to do it. And would that create better education or worse education? And in my mind, I don't think it's even close.
That's right.
It's not even close. There would be some school somewhere where they tried something that didn't quite work, and the kids might not score as well on some stupid test, but the reality is, even where they tried something new, they would have the experience of having tried something new and learned from failure.
Right.
Anybody who has succeeded in this world understands that failure is a part of the process and you learn from it. The beauty of a free economy, a free market economy, is the creative destruction of mistakes, hardworking, brilliant people who, well, it just didn't work out the way I thought it would. And then they go on to do something else. Failure is going to be all around us, but we now have an education system dictated by a bunch of pointy-headed people in Washington who, for the most part, have never taught anybody in any classroom anywhere, telling teachers all over the country the 72 pieces of paperwork they need to fill out before they can teach your kid. And so we have to get away from that. The promise of Trump, which I think is wildly overstated, but the promise is that he's gonna drain the swamp, he's gonna break it up, he's gonna be creative destruction in Washington, D.C. We desperately need it. And to the extent he does it, even if he fails, if he is a change agent 1/10 of the time, that will be 1,000,000% more than any president we've had in the last 16 years and or more, 24 or 80 or however many years. That's his success. If he's able to even create, even with all the mixed signals, with him not getting it in a full way, if he's able to open up some creative thinking that we could do something a different way in Washington, it will make a huge bit of difference. And I am, some people have complained a lot about his nominees for the cabinet. I've looked at him and said, with the exception of, I think, Jeff Sessions, who I don't support for AG, I think everybody he's picked, I have more confidence in them than I do in Mr. Trump. And so I can hardly complain. I think Betsy DeVos at the Department of Education is not part of the professional education establishment, and that's good, not bad.
Right.
And I see again and again, Stuart Price, not Stuart Price, maybe it is Stuart Price. I'm forgetting his name, but your AG, who may head up the EPA. He's someone who's taken the EPA to task. Now, it doesn't mean he disagrees with every aspect of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, but it does mean that he comes to it with a different attitude, not just, hey, let's keep on doing what we've been doing. We need that. And so, I do have some hope that Trump may unleash some forces that are desperately needed in Washington. And right at the top, and I don't know, years ago when New York City moved to weaken term limits, Trump was all for it and spoke derogatorily about term limits. Now he's embraced them and says we need them for Congress and is going to push a vote. Now, I don't know every move and every change and decision that goes on in his head, but I'll tell you what, it is a masterstroke to be pushing this Congress to vote on term limits, and it will help spur term limits to be in effect for Congress sooner than they otherwise would be. And so he's going to gain if he does that sort of thing. The more he tries to do it as I'm Mr. Wonderful and I'm going to make all the deals, the more I think he will not succeed. And so I think that's really the rub for the Trump administration. Does he get a wildfire going of people thinking of new ways to do things and that change is possible? Or does he get people thinking, hey, Mr. Trump's going to do it all with his brilliant deal making? The first way I think we succeed and he becomes a very successful president. The second way, I think he reminds everyone a lot of Barack Obama and George W. Bush, and both in temperament and every other way, Bill Clinton.
Well, in Italy, my father came from Italy. He came from the time when the government was turned over to Mussolini, and Mussolini was going to make everything right. And, it caused a lot of problems. My grandfather, his business was taken away by the government, and he wound up committing suicide. And I guess that was making things right in someone's mind, but I didn't think it was a good thing to do. It seems that what the American public does not understand is that our form of government is more of a fascist form of government than it is free enterprise. But no one would dare use that word relative to the United States. If he wanted to keep cars made in America, he would go to Ford and say, Ford, you're on your own. You make the cars the way you want. All regulations regarding car making is off the table. Do the right thing. Now, obviously, if you make a car where the wheels fall off, you're going to get sued and going to be out of business. And of course, they wouldn't do that. They want to make the best car possible. But as far as hiring and how you conduct your business, we are taking all of government regulations off of your back. Now compete with Mexico. That would have been something that would have been transformative for our entire nation. But no, he puts a tariff on. And guess when we had tariffs last time that were raised to protect U.S. industry and what the results were? the Great Depression, and here we are again. And I'm betting that we're going to have another Great Depression because we're going to try to protect American industry.
Yes, and you know, it may be that China's fooling around with their currency, that there's certain things that are unfair. If he can negotiate something that makes it to where they're playing more fairly, that's great. But if he somehow, you know, backs China into some confrontation where there's less trade, it's going to hurt China, but it's going to hurt us too.
Right.
We are in a situation where we want to make peace, and one of the things that I've liked about Donald Trump, especially from a foreign policy standpoint, is a couple of different times he said, "Look, I'm a businessman. My job is to get along with people because I want to do my product or my service and sell it. I don't want there to be trouble. That makes it harder to do business." And that's exactly right. If he follows that, we're in very good shape. If instead he decides to get into a personal, you know, squabble with people in other countries, that's terrible. And it will not only be terrible for them, it will be terrible for us.
Yeah, the only problem, Paul, that I see with that scenario is that he talks peace, but yet he wants to build up our military, you know, worldwide, you know, so everyone will know that we're the toughest bully on the block and no one can touch us. That's that's talking, as they say here in Oklahoma, you speak with forked tongue. You know, oh, I'm going to get along with everyone, but my bases are going to be right around, going to be on your soil, and you better do what I say. I mean, it just you're not sure what he's saying. Now, if he said, I want to get along with everyone, and we're closing every military base that's not on mainland American soil, bringing everyone home, and by the way, there's going to be no draft, but everyone's in the military. Should someone attack, everybody has a gun. Everyone defend their home. I'm with him. But we don't hear that. We hear we're going to make peace around the world, and if you don't like peace, we're going to have enough troops to make you forced to have peace. I mean, it makes no sense. He sends double, triple signals out, and I'm not sure what he's saying. And by the way, I want to make something very clear. I am not a Hillary supporter at all. In fact, if someone put a gun to my head and I had to vote for either what I call Hitlery or Donald Trump, I would have voted for Donald Trump. I voted for the Libertarian candidate. I voted for Johnson. But
you know what David Bose of the Cato Institute said? The right response was, if someone put a gun to your head and said you had to vote for Trump or Hillary, you should say, pull the trigger. No, it's you know what, I think people on a very basic level agree with the idea of peace through strength. And that idea, and I agree with that. We want to be strong enough that no one is tempted to sneak on over here and take what's ours, to take any part of this country or any people. At the same time, if what we need to make the right deals around the world is a military that's second to none and that nobody could beat in a war, well, we have had that since World War I, really, but obviously so since World War II. We've had that every second of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year. And so that is not, having military bases everywhere and having 300 ships or 400 or 600 and having all these people in uniform, unless you want to go to war all the time, that there's a certain point at which you're strong enough to repel any aggression. And if you go beyond that, you are being aggressive. And we are being aggressive around the world.
Right.
Why we decided to get involved in Iraq, why we have U.S. troops on the ground, even though we're lied to by our politicians and by the major media, and they pretend that somehow we don't have boots on the ground. We've got American soldiers in Syria right now. Right. We've got them in Mosul. We're at war there. We're at war in Afghanistan. When can we ever leave? There's no plan that makes any sense. In fact, there's really no plan. but even when they have had plans, none of them made sense that we could ever leave. When will Afghanistan be a stable enough country that our sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters and great-grandsons and granddaughters don't have to go there and die and risk their lives? There's no plan. And so, I am hopeful to some degree, and I think Trump has better instincts when it comes to foreign policy than, say, a Hillary Clinton, who was as much a neoconservative when it came to war and peace as anybody in the Republican Party.
Right.
But he still has that braggadocio, bomb the out of them. And that is not, when you look back at the founders of this country, they were not people who went around saying bomb the out of them.
Right.
They were people who talked about peace and no entangling alliances and taking care of what's ours. So, we have, I think, a lot of danger around the world. I look at the world today and all the different conflicts and the fact that we created ISIS by our invasion of Iraq, and that we are, I think, playing a game with them that makes them bigger and more important. And it's worldwide. You almost have to wonder if we're not already in like a World War III situation. And I think there are a lot of people who are scared of us going to war with Russia. And we're pledged to go to war against Russia if they make any move into Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia. And such a move is certainly not outside the realm of possibility. So it's a very dangerous world. I don't think Donald Trump is the best guy we could have as commander-in-chief. I don't think he's worse than Hillary would have been, which is sad to say. And again, that's the choice we had. You can blame the people who voted for one or for the other, but I don't. I don't blame any of them because we didn't get a decent choice. And so what do we do about it? Well, what we do about it is we take care of business in our community, in our state, and we try to rein them in when it involves stuff all over the world. And one way to do that, it's funny to come first full circle here, but in the next year, because of court cases, they are either going to take away the draft registration program because it only affects men, and that is predicated on a court decision that said since women aren't in combat roles, women aren't subject to the military draft and therefore don't have to register for it. Now, women are welcomed, maybe too nice of a word, but they are allowed in and should be welcomed into any service, any combat role that they can fulfill the requirements of. I think that that's great. At the same time, what that means is that the courts are going to require us to expand draft registration to our daughters. And it's ridiculous on so many levels. It's ridiculous because the draft is wrong. As Ronald Reagan said, the draft registration destroys the very values our society is committed to defending.
That's right. We
don't conscript people into service. We don't force people to go fight wars. That's what dictatorships do. That's what Napoleon and Hitler did, and Stalin, and so on. Secondly, this list they're getting by registering people, it's just going to cause problems where people like me will go to prison to fight it.
Right.
And now you're going to expand that to a bunch of women who are going to be threatened with 5 years in prison because they don't morally believe this is right. And third, we don't have a military scheme that requires millions of more soldiers in uniform. And if we needed it at any time, the American people will come running. So this whole thing, as you know, I went to jail for 5 months back in the 80s because I refused to register for the draft. And in my trial, the prosecution admitted that they had all the information they needed to send me a draft notice. What they didn't have that they wanted was what the law required was for me to present myself and submit to. And that's what this whole registration program is about, that the government ultimately owns your life, and they want you to acknowledge that right now. Right. Well, there are people like me who are never, ever, ever going to acknowledge that because it's not true.
Right.
And we are more than willing to defend the country. So that's just a tiny issue, but it shows the ridiculous lengths that folks in power will go to. This doesn't help them any, except as a way to somehow tell people that you're not really a free person after all. It's a silly program, and yet we've spent millions and millions on it year after year, as if we're still trying to fight some, the draft was necessary, if you want to say that, in World War II, only as a way to block people who wanted to get into the military from getting in.
Right. Well, it's a shame that we don't take the same position as Switzerland, in that they say everyone is in the military, but we don't go to foreign soils. We don't have to make uniforms up. Everyone owns a gun. Every family should have guns. And if someone should invade the United States, of course, we have a missile defense system and an air force, but we stay on our own soil. Should someone come here, everyone, men, women, and children, are in the military automatically. What you're doing is you're protecting your livelihood. You're protecting your family, your residence, your town. So you don't have to induct anyone. Everyone automatically, should someone come to our soil, which they would never do. Because if they did, first of all, they wouldn't make it halfway here with all of the armament that we have and the high-tech stuff. If someone decided to have a armada of ships coming over here to attack us and bring people here, they would be blown out of the water before they get a few feet outside in the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. So, it's all ludicrous. We are going there to interfere, to control other countries for some perceived benefit by a few individuals at the expense of the populace. But unfortunately, we are out of time. Paul, I'd like to give you the last 30 seconds, okay, to wrap things up for us. I'm sorry, this hour just absolutely flew by. You've got to come back really soon. Let me give you the last 30 seconds, okay?
Well, it's always fun, and the hour always flies because it's great talking to you, Joe. We want a better world. No one's going to do it for us.
Right.
Nobody built your house for you without you paying the money. Nobody's done everything for you. You've had to do it yourself. Government works the same way. If you love Trump, don't sit on your butt. Go help him. If you can't stand Trump, don't sit on your butt. Go stop him. And if you want to just say, forget about Mr. Trump, how do I make my community better? Hold government accountable, fight these crony capitalist insider deals, and protect our liberties, then go to libertyifund.org and find out how to get involved and do stuff in your community, your state, to make this a better place.
Paul, thank you so much for being on our show. I can't wait for our next session. I hope you will come back.
I sure will.
Thank you, Paul. Take care now. Thank you so much. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.